and think about this talk tonight. I suspect, like many of us, we have a sense of overwhelm in the presence of the election process. And I don't know about you, but I suspect that it's really easy to feel, well, overwhelmed, assaulted, lots of other things by that. But you know what? The election process is only being added on top of everything else. And I don't mean only our own lives, but look what we, as the human race, is facing. We all know what's happening with the planet, that it's being plundered, the species that are on the verge of extinction, the global climate change that is threatening us, and all of this just is truly overwhelming. In fact, I think that the word heartbreak, I think we can feel brokenhearted over all of everything that is facing us, and helpless. Like, what is it that we can do? What can I do in the midst of all of this incredible global changes that are happening, all the violence, all the seeming cruelty, these changes? And thinking about what our answers, and I think each of us have some answers we've come across, and I will suggest, I think that what we do is maybe we try to take action. Maybe trying in our own way to do something that is beneficial. I suspect, and I think we don't only do one thing, I think we do more than one. I think that also there are times when we just need to forget it and focus on our lives. And I'm sure all of us who are in this room as well, and who have been practicing for any length of time, are also trying to cultivate kindness and compassion, equanimity, and bringing these qualities, sympathetic joy, bringing these qualities to all of the incredible changes that the human race, that the planet is facing. And still, I think that we are brokenhearted about it. How can it be any other way? In addition to these responses, and I think we all may have all of them, in addition to them, I'd like to suggest there's one other response. And I will call it an ultimate response, in the sense that it is a response on the ultimate level of awareness. And that is the response of acceptance. Acceptance. I don't know about you. Maybe you're saying, what? Acceptance. When I first heard that, and I'm not the first one to say this, by the way, for years, spiritual teachings have taught that. When I first heard it was many years ago. I was practicing Zen, in Zen Buddhism. And I remember I was just, first of all, surprised. I was baffled. And you know what? I was kind of angry. What do you mean, acceptance? I'm supposed to accept all this? And it wasn't, whatever at that time were the huge issues. There have always been huge issues. How can I possibly, we need to do something. So the years have passed. I'm no longer in Zen, what's in my heart. And I've gotten a bit deeper appreciation of what that acceptance means. And so some years later, I've come across the same teaching elsewhere. And tonight I wanted to read you just that teaching from one other source. And it's from a little book that I've had for quite a while. It's called Letters of the Scattered Brotherhood. This is a really beautiful book. And it is a compilation of essays that were written during World War II. They appeared in a religious magazine, and I will dare say they don't mention the name in here, what magazine it was, but it was from a Christian perspective. But it doesn't matter the perspective. What was clear is it coming from the same inner perspective, the same contemplative approach that we practice here. Differences in wording, yeah, and some of it in terms of a Christian belief system, but the heart of it is all the same. And I couldn't help, as I've read this, when I first read it, and I've read it several times since, or dipped into it, couldn't help but just be moved in my heart by the fact that these were originally written during World War II. It was published in 1947 or 49, but originally written during the middle of the war, when there was devastation everywhere. Just devastation, when millions of people were being killed. Cities were being ruined, thousands of not only people, millions of not only people, but other beings being killed. Devastation was terrific. And here were these essays or articles, whatever they were, that were being written and finally compiled. So I want to read you just one part of one essay. And it says, "In broad daylight, eyes wide open, looking at a house, a street, a hill, or a common scene of every day, look at your picture with its tendency to stir up trains of thought, of memory, of anxiety, and dissolve it to the eternal moment while you look. That house grows old. The leaves fall from the tree. The spring comes to renew the world. It's not for you to be dismayed about any of it. No, the eternal moment, which is part of your Godhead, futureless, without past, gives more beauty to the scene because you are there, and yet you are not there. You are in truth and not deceived. You are in pure joy and not made tragic by your thoughts of comparison. You are in peace and not in turmoil. This is a secret of great value, for it will give you spiritual stamina, strength from regret, and will hold you to your true stature." I'll hold you to your true stature. I've often thought, thinking about this, and the advice, and the teaching of acceptance, I've said, yes, true, but, and there's the but. Yes, but. And what's the but? The but is, the problems we're facing these days are problems that are just going to be irrevocable. I mean, if you want to think about World War II and from the perspective of hindsight, and if we can overlook millions of deaths and incredible damage, we can say, yes, but they built better than before. And the world went on and it continued to grow. But now we're facing something that's not going to continue. We're facing what seems to be the end of the possibilities of much of the world that as we know it now. In fact, I always find it sobering. I think it's very likely that we are experiencing now in our day the best that this planet has to offer. And it's very possible future generations will not be able to experience the same. Like, wow, what a realization. Not taking it for granted. So I think that being so much impacted and so much, and I said so heartbroken about what's going on these days. In a way, it's easy to say, okay, back in World War II, yes, it was a catastrophe everywhere. But we overcame. Human beings finally overcame despite the dreadful losses. Now we can't do that. Now we can't do that. So I think there is a deeper understanding beyond the saying that we are facing an ending. We are, very likely. I don't know, I've just received, just talking about some of the endings, I just received some mail about the extinction of honeybee, the massive die-off of honeybees. I'm sure all of you have heard about it. Last year alone, 40% of the honeybees died. And they died because one of the major factors, maybe not the only, but a major factor, is being linked to a pesticide that has a nerve agent in it that kills the bees. If the bees die, then what? They are the pollinators. Our fruits and vegetables are pollinated by bees. Without the bees, if this continues, without the bees, then what? It's another one of these questions of then what's going to happen? We don't know what's going to happen. Things seem to be spinning out of our control. You know, it's easy, I think, and natural to want to find someone to blame. And big corporations can be a very easy target. And I read in this literature about the honeybees, and I'm not saying it was wrong, but they were talking about the corporation that makes, which is not American corporation, by the way, like at least one isn't an American corporation, but they said this corporation is making making poison profits, is how they talk about it, at the expense of being a steward of this planet. And of course, it's not just that one corporation. Not just that one. We see evidence of this kind of thing like everywhere that we look. And I mean the plundering of this planet. We know about the devastation of the rainforest, not just corporation, it's individual, or I guess it's businesses that are cutting down the rainforests in order to make profit. What about the water in Flint, Michigan? I guess it wasn't a corporation, it was the state officials. Always someone. And then the other day, I received this. And I thought, wow, this fits right into my talk. Bed Bath & Beyond. And you see the salt lamps from a salt lamp, that's what this is. I'm sure most of you know that. You've seen them before, maybe? Okay, they're salt lamps. These are made of salt, and these particular lamps are from salt mines in the Himalayas. And what they do is they hollow out the center and put a little bulb in there. And the lamps, the salt, are supposed to give out negative ions, which are very helpful. In fact, I was just in the office of a healthcare worker not too long ago, and they have a special deal going where if you, did something and something else, you get their raffle, and if you won, you can be in their room filled with salt lamps and negative ions. And that's supposed to be really great. So, but what I thought about wasn't just the negative ions, which is supposed to be helpful. I also thought, okay, Himalayas, no doubt it is profit, income for a really impoverished people in this area. At the same time, isn't it more of a reducing of irreplaceable resource, the salt? When it's gone, it's gone. Like probably the honeybees and a lot of other things. I think, though, past the honeybees and all the other individuals or corporations that we might blame, because we are spiritual practitioners, I suggest we need to turn and look at ourselves. That's what we always do. Our practice is not just about looking out there, although we need to. We need to know what's going on out there. We need to know how and where we want to take action. But we also need to look at ourselves. How am I behaving in my life? Asking the question, have I never acted in ways where I have tried to protect my own interests It's just a small little example of what corporations are doing on a big time. They're not doing anything different. So we turn the question to ourselves. How do I behave? How am I different? And I think that's like a huge question that we can need as spiritual practitioners to be asking ourselves. Which, by the way, I'll put in a plug right now. We're running a course. It's called the Precepts course on once a month for next five months coming up. Investigating and really exploring our moral behavior. And this is the kind of question we can ask ourselves. But going on from there, these are issues that we need to face. And I thought of Gandhi's comment that many of you have heard before, because we've talked about it here, and I'm sure you've read it from other places. He said, become the change that you want to see in the world. Becoming yourself, embody the change you want to see in the world. And he's not just talking about recycling trash or using less electricity here, right? He's talking here deeply about the kind of things we would like to see in this world that seems sometimes so deficient of them. Like kindness and love and harmony. Caring for the fellow creatures, caring for ourselves. To embody, and of course, peace. To embody these things in our own lives. That's what we're called to do. First step. To work. It doesn't happen, obviously. I'm not suggesting it's going to happen right away. It doesn't. It's a lifetime's process, but that's the calling here. To yourself embody, just as Gandhi said, becoming that which we wish to see in the world, not just pointing out there. You know, the Buddha did the same thing in a kind of different ways, and one of those ways is one of the oldest scriptures in the Buddhist tradition. It's published it's part of what is called the Book of Eights. The Book of Eights, and in it the Buddha spoke about the sage as being the ideal person. This was in early days. He wasn't using some of the language used later that we often talk about here. The sage. What is the sage? A sage is one who doesn't dispute with others. The sage is what did he call it? A confessor of peace. The sage doesn't get into arguments. I think we need to understand that more deeply. He doesn't get angry either. The sage is not sitting there and the stuff is happening and he's gritting his teeth and trying to, turn the other cheek. Maybe that's a different tradition. But anyway, he's not sitting there and gritting his teeth and saying, I mustn't be angry. He's just sage, according to the Buddha. He doesn't get angry. That doesn't mean he doesn't act, by the way. That's the next thing that we tend to think of. What? I'm supposed to just lie over and play dead? No. But to act from the place, as did Gandhi, where it's not out of anger. And that was the sage. And this is what the Buddha was calling us to be as well. The sage has stepped back. He is not, or she, is not caught in the forefront issues of daily life. He might, or she might, act in daily life, and certainly we are called to do that, but not caught up so that we're being reactive. Which is, coming back to what I said before, that's acceptance. The sage accepts what is there. The sage has, in other terms that we've heard, surrendered. Now, in a way, what I'm going to start and kind of verge into right here is really hard to talk about. Why? Because, in fact, it can't be talked about, but lots of words have been said about it. So I'm going to just preface before I get into it and say, I know that there's a wide variety of both experience, spiritual experience here, and also different levels of understanding. That's as it should be. We each come to practice, and we come with an inquiring mind, or maybe we come in for many reasons because we are so suffering so much, but we come. There's always a beginning. And I think of it like I had the image of a tree, and it's not my own image. I think I've heard it before. But when we start practicing, it's like we're part of it, the trunk of the tree. And this is the main path. And you come to a tradition, any tradition, and you see what's being taught, and it starts to carry you on. And as you develop further, you go off into a big branch. Fewer people. Others are going off into other branches of that tradition. Other understandings, and eventually as our life unfolds in the spiritual practice, we're out on a little twig. We are the little twig. But we're part of a whole. And that's how I see all of us here. It doesn't matter where, or if you feel like, oh boy, I'm brand new here, and others have been here for years and years, which some have, true. But it doesn't matter. We're all part of this whole. And we're all part of this tradition. This inquiry that is just pulling you and drawing you. Having said that, I want to turn now to this acceptance. And I will call it ultimate acceptance. Acceptance on the ultimate level. Because ultimate acceptance means stop resisting. Resisting what? Resisting anything. Do not resist anything. I'm going to paraphrase something that Jack Kornfield said. I don't have the exact quote, but he said in effect, and Jack Kornfield, by the way, for those of you who don't know, is a major teacher in the Theravada, in the Vipassana Buddhist tradition, insight meditation. He said, most of us want what we don't have, and we don't want what we do have. The secret is to turn that around and want what you have and don't want what you don't have. The sage. It's easy to say, and it stuck with me because it's such a neat little way of turning it. But of course, that's the whole practice. How is it we can get into the place where we don't want what we don't have and do want what we do have, especially if what we've got is really painful? Why want it? Okay, so maybe better than want, we can say accept. Can we accept what we have? And accepting means with an open heart and not resisting it. What is resistance? It doesn't have to be this big major deal. It can be something as slight as a contraction in your belly, in your heart, in your solar plexus. There's something that is being resisted in the moment you feel that contraction. I invited you tonight, and we often do when we practice insight meditation. Notice what's going on in your body right now. How's it feel? And a lot of times, we've got these places where they're big, not just a contraction, it's like a big explosion inside. That's resistance. Something is being resisted by me, by you, by us. This is what acceptance is not. Acceptance is the overcoming of the resistance. Acceptance is stopping in the moment and simply standing in the place of stillness. When we stand in the place of stillness, and in the meditation tonight I called it natural awareness, the background awareness. When we stand there, then we see. And what is it we see? I think what we see is best expressed in poetry. And I have here a poem by Juan Ramon Jimenez, which I think is just a beautiful, short little poem. He calls it Oceans. Spanish. He was a Spanish poet. He said, I have a feeling that my boat has struck down there in the depths against a great thing. And nothing happens. Nothing. Silence. Waves. Nothing happens? Or has everything happened? And we are standing now quietly in the new life. That's it. Struck against the great thing in the depths. A radical flip, we could say. A radical flip in the way we I can say we, relate. It's not quite we. There is, when this flip happens, as it did when his boat struck the great thing, all of a sudden, things change. A recognition on this level, we can call it the ultimate level, that all the things that we identify with and think is the full story aren't the full story. Not like they're not there, but they're not the full story. Our lives and our wonderful things that happen, the difficult things that happen, we identify with them. It's not the full thing. Down there in the depths is the great thing. And nothing happens, or has everything happened? What Jimenez saw was that this great thing, and I've called it natural awareness, is found in the depths of yourself. You can find it. And I know there are people here in this room, in fact, who have. And there are others, maybe, who haven't. But I suspect that you yearn for it. Maybe even if you don't know, you yearn for it. Otherwise, why are you sitting here and not in, I don't know, in front of a computer or wherever else you might be? Listening to a rock concert, whatever else. Why are you here? Well, there's something that is being yearned for. And ultimately, it's this great thing. So that's why I call this true north. Jimenez pointed out it's inside. True north refers to the North Star. It's what sailors used to set their sights to when they sailed at night so that they could sail true north. It was an external star. What Jimenez is pointing out, well, that is inside us. It's an internal star. That's true north. That's true north. So in tonight's meditation, I invited you to step back from your attention to your body or the sounds or thoughts. Step back into the background awareness. I call the body and the sounds and so forth. That's the foreground of our attention. That's where our attention usually is in life. That's what we usually call life. That's it. The foreground of our attention. It's not the whole thing. That's what Jimenez is pointing out. There's more. There's the background awareness. The awareness that knows. And you can find it. And as I said, many of you have. You can find it simply by stepping back for a moment, dropping the thoughts, just being present in stillness. Now, some of you perhaps did not do that tonight. It didn't work. I mean, I've talked to people before and they said, nope, my mind was wall-to-wall thinking, didn't manage a second of thought. No problem. I mean, a second of silence, and that's not a problem. Because, why is it not a problem? Because you've got infinite opportunities to recognize it, as long as you're alive. Didn't work tonight, maybe? How about when you go home? Tomorrow, the next day. Just drop out for a moment. Drop out of the thought. That's it. So, you say, it is? Like, heck, I've dropped thoughts before and nothing, it's just a little bit of silence between the thoughts and then I go right on. But my life is busy. I need to keep on. The next step, after you experience it, is to appreciate it. You say, instead of bypassing, oh, yeah, right, moment of silence, let's go on with my life. Appreciate what it really is. I'm telling you now what it really is, but you know what? It's actually something you need to begin to live into and know it for yourself. This is the great thing. And it may not be clear right away. Keep practicing. Keep dropping into it. And this is the invitation. Whether you have experienced it for a moment, glimpsed it, or whether you haven't, keep practicing with it during your daily life. Keep doing that. You're walking down the street. You're standing in a food line. Wherever else, at a stoplight. Just for an instant, drop thoughts. And then come back. You do want to notice when the light changes, of course. You don't want to be in thoughtlessness then. Come back. But do it time and again and time and again. Practice with it. And then you begin to realize, whoa, there's something here. Many of us, or most of us, I guess I'd say, are so busy with what we're doing in life, we just don't take the time. We don't have the time, we don't appreciate, which brings me to I wanted to read you another excerpt from a poem by Pablo Neruda, Chilean poet. It's called an excerpt from Keeping Quiet. He said, "If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and threatening ourselves with death." A huge silence interrupting this sadness of never understanding ourselves and threatening ourselves with death. Well, I'll give us a little bit of benefit of the doubt here, and I'll say, I think that many of us partly understand ourselves at least. Maybe it's not total black misunderstanding. But this racing on is very noisy, right? We don't have time to get into the silence. Threatening ourselves with death, what that refers to is a spiritual death. I mean, we're not awake. That's a spiritual death. We're only partly awake. So we go through life kind of in a semi-sleeping, sleepwalking mode. That's what he's saying. Hey, wake up. Allow a silence to interrupt all of this activity. Allow it to interrupt. How do we do it? Step out, just what I was saying. Step back, just for a moment. Step back. You don't have to try to do anything else except step back. In fact, the moment we begin trying to do something, aside from dropping into the silence, we've lost it. So this is not about trying to achieve anything, not trying to be anything, even not trying to be mindful, by golly. It's just being. It's just being there for a moment, and then come back into life, to your life. So say you have glimpsed it, say you do appreciate, okay, I got it, I understand it, I feel it, I understand what's important. Then the next step is, we need to stay true to it. Once we get it, our life is about staying true to it. And what a task that is. It's like, I'm sure for some it has come to an end. I don't personally know that, but I'm sure for some it has come to an end. Aligning your life with what you know to be the truest, the deepest thing that you know. Aligning your life, bringing your life into alignment with it. You know, I'm thinking it's already about 10 to, a little bit less than 10 to. We don't have a whole lot of time. Maybe I will make this a topic for another time, this talk of aligning your life, aligning one's life. I think that would be a good thing to do. It's a big topic, but just knowing that seeing and glimpsing this natural awareness that I asked us to step back into, that's the beginning, that's the glimpse, that's the great thing. Appreciating what it is, and then once there's appreciation, aligning with it. Huge. I think I will. That will be another talk. But I will say, my understanding of why we meditate, what we do while we're sitting here and meditating, is number one, we are cultivating mindfulness. We're cultivating kindness and all the heart qualities, and these are important. Our daily life is important. We want to make it as beautiful as possible. And, in addition, to be able to embody the fullness of our humanity, we do need to understand this other dimension. And to me, it's quite inspiring to know that we're not alone. Not only do we have each other, but we have all the contemplatives through history and in the future who are right there doing the same thing. And however they use, whatever words they use to discuss this, They're experiencing the same things. They may use very different terms, different practices, same thing. So what I want to do, and hopefully leave a little bit of time for questions if there are any, but first of all, what I want to do is finish off by reading from the preface of this book, Letters of the Scattered Brotherhood, because I find it inspiring. So the Letters of the Scattered Brotherhood have been published in a religious weekly during the past 14 years, and that's the years of World War II and just before. The editor of the magazine once wrote in reply to questions concerning their origin, "They are letters of genuine spiritual experience. They're not contributions written for a journal, nor are they written by only one person. The language common to all of them has been used down the ages in an endeavor to find words to describe and convey the meaning of meditation and spiritual awareness. Anonymity has been preserved for the reason that, with contemporary material of this kind, it has been thought wise to keep the spiritual significance free from personal association. The quotations have been included as evidence of the timelessness of the idea of inner spiritual illumination and of the great companies scattered over the world, over without regard to space, time, age, or creed, who have found faith to walk in immortality now." So thank you for listening. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Questions I'll try to answer, comments I'd love to listen to. Nancy, Elizabeth?
You use the word acceptance.
Yes.
You use the word.
Wait, now there's a trick to this, and I think you have to, first of all, turn it on. I turned it on, didn't, right?
How about that? Is that any
Yeah,
better?
I think that's good.
So you
Okay.
use the word acceptance a number of times, and you use the word surrender, I think only once.
Yeah.
I wondered if you equated the two, if you did not, why you chose one rather than the other.
No, just a quirk. Yeah, I do. I mean, I think we could use either. But as you asked the question, what I realized is I originally wanted to just end up in saying, I understand that the teaching, or not even teaching, the ability of all of this is that in the face of the disasters, the incredibly possibilities that face us, this place of acceptance, this ultimate acceptance, is really the place, ultimately, in which we take refuge. As I was reading that passage from the comments during World War II, facing the disasters, not running from the possibilities that really do face us. They may happen. Can we, in our hearts, hold that? Heartbroken though we may be, doing our best, walking into life and doing our best, but I see it as really, finally we're called to open up that wide. What a message. Yeah, Charlotte.
I got the same mail recently.
Which one?
The one about the bees.
The bees, yes.
Yeah, today. And
Now put it right under your...
I get so angry sometimes about those kinds of things, and I just threw it in the trash. I mean, I was standing over the trash, and I threw it in there. And I get bombarded by all kinds of causes that I've contributed to over the years.
Can you speak up even now?
I'm trying really hard.
Yeah.
I'm also trying not to get angry again, but how do we balance all that out? How do we accept? How do we allow the space for that? How do we do what we can do and not get carrying fatigue?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
I do. That's why I say I think we have that. Carrying fatigue, heartbreak, helplessness. I think we have all of it. And that's what, I don't have one answer, but I think also to recognize underneath it all, there's great love.
Yeah.
Under it all, under all that, all of the whole range of our reactions, there's love. We do care. Whether we're exhausted or helpless, maybe taking refuge in the caring, the love, and then on this other level that I've been talking about, recognizing ultimately we're called to accept. Even the people coming after you, and yes, we're bombarded with these heart-rending pleas all the time. We're not going to stop it. You're not going. Nobody is going to. It's going to continue. No answer except it's there. So the question is, noticing the anger in you, and instead of pointing to them, just allow yourself. Not to be angry with yourself. Bring kindness and love to yourself and to the anger that's there. You can't stop it. It's going to happen. Why get caught up in the spiral of anger? You have a choice. So maybe like we can pull out of thoughts, we can at times pull out of anger. We don't have to feed it. Recognizing, no doubt, there are a bunch of people who are working with the bees who have a passion for preserving bees.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And some of them are maybe in there because they're making money too. That's their job. No doubt, the whole gamut. Nonetheless, now it's up to you. Do I want to get caught up in the cycle of anger because they're bombarding me? Or can I just see the whole, step back, and give myself kindness? I'm doing my best. That kind of response.
And kindness to the bees.
Oh, my. Yes. Anybody else? Yes?
I'm curious to what extent the serenity prayer captures the essence of what you're talking about tonight.
Why don't you say it again?
I was just curious to what extent the serenity prayer sort of captures the essence of what you've been talking about tonight.
Yeah. The serenity prayer, as I understand it, captures it on the level of our everyday life, changing what we can change and being at ease with what we can't change. That's our everyday life. It does not touch, in my understanding of it, this level of the acceptance of all, whether we can change, whether we can't, whether we're angry, whether, as Charlotte said, we're angry about it or we feel helpless, the whole thing. Accepting the whole, I should say, mess, sublime mess of this life on this planet. So that's another level that the serenity prayer doesn't touch, to my knowledge. Yeah. Okay, friends, it is now 9 o'clock, or a little after, so we will see you next week. Have a beautiful week.